Absolutely. Here's an expanded version of Scene 1, fully fleshed out to about 1,000 words, keeping it immersive and detailed. Dash dash dash. The office was unusually silent, the kind of quiet that makes every tick of the clock and hum of the fluorescent lights feel amplified. Ethan Carlyle leaned back in his leather chair, swirling the amber liquid in his glass of scotch, though the drink did little to settle his thoughts. He stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the glittering skyline, but the city lights blurred as his mind became consumed with thoughts of Amelia Grant. She had been on his radar for months now, though not in the trivial way most CEOs noticed a promising employee. It was more than professional admiration, it was the subtle, inexplicable pull she had on him, the quiet intelligence behind her careful movements, the way she carried herself with a strength that seemed almost invisible to everyone else in the office. Tonight, like so many nights before, she was still in the building. Ethan had watched her from the office balcony a few minutes ago as she typed away at her laptop with relentless focus, the glow of the screen illuminating her sharp features. There was a dedication there, an almost stubborn perseverance, that both impressed and unsettled him. He felt an uncomfortable mix of admiration and unease. She worked harder than most, stayed later than most, and never complained, yet there was a light behind her eyes, a softness, that made her seem vulnerable despite her professionalism. Unable to keep his curiosity at bay, Ethan made a decision that went against every rational instinct he had. He placed the untouched scotch back on the table, adjusted his cufflinks, and silently slipped out of the office. He didn't alert security, didn't want to leave a trace. Tonight, he would follow her. Not for business, not for anything professional, he needed to see who she was beyond the polished image she presented at work. The city streets were cool and quiet as he drove, the kind of late-night tranquility that only appeared in neighborhoods long past the evening rush. He trailed her at a careful distance, making sure to stay hidden in the shadows, letting her life unfold in front of him without interference. She walked with a brisk but purposeful gait, her posture straight, her expression neutral. Yet, there was something in the way she held herself, a resilience Ethan couldn't quite name. Hours of corporate life had taught him to read people, to analyze their motives, to predict their behaviors, but here, observing Amelia in the real world, none of that training helped. The city had changed around her, the streets were less familiar, lined with older buildings, small convenience stores, flickering streetlights. Ethan realized he had never seen this side of the world, this side of life, a side Amelia navigated effortlessly while he clung to his bubble of wealth and privilege. Finally, she stopped in front of a small, unassuming apartment building tucked into a quieter corner of the city. The paint was chipped, the steps cracked, and a single flickering lamp illuminated the entryway. Ethan parked several blocks away, his heart beginning to race in a way he hadn't felt in years. What he saw next shook him in a way nothing else had in a long time. She entered the building, and a few moments later, a little girl appeared, rushing to her side with uncontainable excitement. Amelia bent down, her eyes softening as she scooped the child into her arms, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The girl giggled, a sound so light and full of joy it pierced the heaviness Ethan hadn't even realized he carried. Amelia's smile was tender, patient, almost reverent. She whispered something to the girl, and the girl's laughter rang out again, echoing down the hall in a melody Ethan would never forget. Ethan leaned against his car, heart pounding. He had expected to see an apartment, perhaps a modest home, but this human connection, was more than he had anticipated. Here was a woman who, despite working tirelessly in the office, devoted every ounce of her being to her daughter, a small human who clearly depended on her for love, care, and guidance. Ethan felt a pang of guilt for intruding, for following her here, for not having even the faintest understanding of what her life entailed outside the office walls. Minutes passed, and Ethan watched as Amelia moved through the small apartment with practiced efficiency. She unpacked a bag of groceries, carefully placing items into worn cabinets, and then checked on her daughter, who was now sitting at a small table drawing with crayons. Ethan's chest tightened as he saw the contrast between the life he had assumed she lived and the reality before him. This was not just an employee, this was a mother, a guardian, a woman balancing the demands of a high-pressure career with the responsibilities of raising a child alone. Ethan's mind raced back to countless interactions they had shared in the office, her dedication, her late hours, the way she had covered for colleagues without complaint. He had assumed it was ambition, a desire to climb the corporate ladder. But now he saw that it was far more profound. Every action at work, every sleepless night, every moment of composure, was part of a life built for someone else, a life of quiet sacrifice. He remembered how she always insisted she didn't need help, how she brushed off suggestions or offers of assistance. Now he understood why. Accepting help wasn't just inconvenient, it might have meant compromising the stability she had fought so hard to maintain for her daughter. Ethan's chest tightened further as he considered the world she navigated daily, a world full of challenges he couldn't even imagine. His heart ached with an unfamiliar mix of respect, sorrow, and something more vulnerable, something he was barely willing to admit to himself. Amelia finally sat down at the small table, her daughter leaning against her, head resting on her shoulder as she carefully explained a drawing. Ethan watched them for what felt like an eternity, the warmth between them illuminating the stark, humble apartment in a way that made his luxury high-rise office feel hollow. He realized that money, power, and influence were meaningless in comparison to the strength, resilience, and love Amelia displayed every day without fanfare or recognition. The realization hit him like a physical blow. For all his accomplishments, all his wealth and influence, he had been blind to the quiet heroism of people like Amelia. And now, seeing her so vulnerably, so beautifully human, he understood something fundamental. He had been living in a bubble, insulated from the realities of those around him, and perhaps the most devastating truth was that he had never truly seen her at all. As he sat there, hidden in the shadows, Ethan felt a heaviness settle over him. It was a mixture of guilt, awe, and an unfamiliar, wrenching empathy. He had come to the city streets with curiosity, perhaps a sense of intrigue, but what he found was humbling, life-altering, and heartbreakingly real. He realized that nothing in his life, neither wealth, nor influence, nor power, could replicate the courage, patience, and quiet determination Amelia displayed every day for the sake of someone she loved unconditionally. And in that moment, Ethan understood that he had crossed a line he could never undo, yet he could not regret what he had witnessed. Because witnessing it had shattered the illusions he held about the people around him. About life, about what it meant to truly struggle and to truly love. And though his heart ached in ways he had never anticipated, he also felt something else, a profound, unspoken respect, and a longing to see her not just as an employee or a subordinate, but as a person, complex, extraordinary, and heartbreakingly human. He stayed in the shadows for a while longer, watching Amelia laugh softly with her daughter, feeling the city's chill seep into him, yet unwilling to leave. The night had revealed truths he could not unsee, truths that would linger in his mind and reshape the way he saw the world. And as the mother and child finally settled in for the evening, Ethan silently vowed that he would carry this knowledge with him, letting it inform not only how he led his company but how he led his life. If you want, I can also expand scene 2 to 1,000 words in the same immersive style so the story flows as a full cinematic narrative. Do you want me to do that next? Absolutely. Here's an expanded, immersive 1,000-word version of scene 2. The next morning, Ethan Carlisle found it impossible to focus. The polished surfaces of his office, the panoramic view of the city, the hum of computers, all of it blurred into the background as his thoughts remained stubbornly fixed on Amelia Grant. He watched her from across the open-plan office, pretending to be engrossed in quarterly reports and emails, but every keystroke she made, every thoughtful glance at her screen, pulled at him. He had been so sure he understood the people he worked with, the hierarchy, the ambitions, but last night had proven how little he truly knew. Amelia's life, her struggles, her devotion to her daughter, it was all beyond anything he could have imagined. Ethan tried to push the thought away. He had come to a conclusion: he couldn't keep this to himself. He needed to speak with her, not in a managerial capacity, not as a CEO dictating orders, but as someone who had glimpsed her life and felt the weight of it. He didn't know exactly how to start. The act of following her last night was indefensible. Yet the images of her tenderly caring for her daughter, the laughter they shared, the resilience she embodied, pressed him forward with a force he couldn't ignore. By mid-morning, he decided he could wait no longer. He left his office, walking briskly toward her desk, feeling the cool tension of anticipation tighten around his chest. Amelia looked up as he approached, her expression polite but cautious. She had always been professional, but today, there was a faint flicker of curiosity, as if she sensed that something had shifted in him. "Amelia," he said, keeping his voice calm, though inside, every nerve in his body was alert. "Can we talk for a moment?" She nodded slowly, an eyebrow raised in cautious inquiry. "Of course, Mr. Carlisle." He led her toward a quiet corner of the office, away from prying eyes and the faint hum of coworkers. The room was small, but it felt intimate in a way that suited the conversation he needed to have. He inhaled deeply, trying to steady himself, trying to find the right words. He had rehearsed this moment countless times in his mind, but now, facing her, he realized that words alone might not be enough. I need to apologize, he began, choosing each word with care. Last night, I did something I shouldn't have. I didn't know how to approach it without sounding intrusive, but I felt compelled to understand something about you, something I had never seen before. Amelia's brow furrowed slightly, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension crossing her features. I don't understand, she said softly, her voice calm but wary. Ethan paused, searching for clarity in his own thoughts. I saw your life outside the office. I followed you, and I know that sounds unacceptable, because it is, but I needed to see who you are when no one else is watching. And what I saw, it was humbling, and it broke my heart. Her eyes widened, the realization settling in. You followed me. He flinched, his own guilt sharp and immediate. Yes, and I know it was wrong. I crossed a line, but it wasn't curiosity in a trivial sense. It was, he struggled, searching for words that could explain the mixture of awe, respect, and vulnerability he felt. It was the need to understand. To see what you endure, what you sacrifice, and how incredible you are. Amelia looked away, biting her lip as she processed his words. The office noise seemed to fade, leaving only the weight of this confession between them. I appreciate that you're concerned, she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. But following someone, that's not something that can just be overlooked. It's invasive. Ethan nodded, accepting the sting of her truth. I know, he admitted, his voice low. I can't undo what I did. But I had to see it. And now that I have, I want to make one thing clear, I see you. Not just as an employee, not just as someone who works hard and meets deadlines, but as a person. As a mother, as a human being carrying responsibilities and love that I had no understanding of before. Amelia's gaze softened slightly, though her expression remained guarded. I've always been careful about keeping my life private, she said, her words measured. It's not easy, balancing everything, and I've learned to rely only on myself. Accepting help, it's complicated. Ethan took a careful step closer, his tone gentle. I'm not offering help as your boss, or in any way that would compromise your independence. I'm offering it because I've seen the strength you carry every day, the love that drives you, and the sacrifices no one else notices. You shouldn't have to shoulder it alone if there's a way I can support you. Her eyes met his, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through the professional mask she always wore. I don't know if I can trust someone who intruded into my life like that, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Trust isn't given lightly when you've had to protect someone else your entire life. I understand, Ethan said, feeling the full weight of her words. And I don't expect immediate forgiveness, or even acceptance. I just need you to know that my intentions are sincere, however flawed my approach may have been. I want to respect you and your life, not control it or judge it. A long silence stretched between them. Amelia looked down, her fingers tapping nervously against her notebook. Ethan watched her, noting the small details, the way her brow furrowed, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the quiet strength that radiated from her despite the uncertainty in her gaze. He realized then that his admiration for her had nothing to do with infatuation or desire, it was deeper, more profound. It was respect, awe, and the recognition of someone who carried the weight of the world with grace and determination. Finally, she looked up, her eyes meeting his. You can't undo what happened, she said softly, but I can see that you understand now. That means something. Maybe it's a start. Ethan felt a flicker of relief, though it was tempered by humility. It's more than a start for me, he said quietly. Seeing you, understanding you, has changed how I view everything. My assumptions, my judgments, the way I interact with people, I see now how much I've overlooked, how blind I've been. And I want to do better. Not just for you, but for everyone whose life I touch. Amelia's expression softened further, a small, cautious smile forming. I don't know what that looks like yet, she admitted, but I appreciate the honesty. That's rare in your world. Ethan nodded, feeling a strange warmth settle in his chest, a combination of relief, hope, and a quiet admiration that went beyond words. I don't expect anything from you, Amelia. Only that you know you are seen, that you are recognized, and that your strength does not go unnoticed. You are extraordinary, and I would be honored if, moving forward, we could find a way to build trust. She looked at him, vulnerability mingling with the cautious confidence she always carried. We'll see, she said softly. We'll see how this goes. Ethan smiled faintly, understanding that this was more than a professional conversation, it was the beginning of a new awareness, a new understanding between two people. For the first time, he didn't see her as an employee, a subordinate, or a cog in his corporate machine. He saw a person, a human being whose courage, resilience, and love had quietly reshaped his perception of the world. And that recognition, fragile as it was, filled him with a sense of purpose he had never known in his life of wealth, power, and influence. He left the conversation with a heart heavier than before, yet somehow lighter, carrying the knowledge that real connection, real understanding, required humility, patience, and respect. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt ready to see people, not as roles or titles, but as the extraordinary, flawed, and resilient human beings they truly were. If you want, I can now create cinematic style image prompts for both scenes, so they could be visualized as if from a movie or graphic novel. It would really enhance the story's emotional impact. Do you want me to do that next?